Welcome to Curator at the Museum. On display on our shelves, we don't have paintings or sculptures or even ancient artifacts. Our exhibit pieces here are Lego sets. As an adult collector, my point of view on Lego is that they're as much of a work of art as a playable toy. Something that can be displayed, shared, and admired. The adult line of Lego sets have had such a meteoric rise in the last several years, which brings us to what we do on this channel. Our museum display pieces deserves effort, care, and attention to keep them looking as pristine as possible. Our films will take you through the work we do at this museum in the service of that very goal. Hope you enjoy, and thank you for watching. Stories at the museum, making these videos sometimes can be a little bit tricky, especially with sets that take inspiration from larger universes like Star Wars or Marvel. There's just so much history and lore already there, so it becomes a little bit more difficult to choose what to highlight. The Star Wars theme is one we will revisit at the museum quite often, but today's set is going to be a smaller but one of the most iconic ships in the entire original trilogy. If the first impression we get of the Empire is the Devastator Star Destroyer, then the corresponding Rebel ship that gives us a first impression has to be the Tantive IV, first seen in the first shot of The New Hope, desperately speeding away from the Devastator Star Destroyer. There is a whole backstory into how the Tantive IV came to be in this predicament, but for that, I'd say watch Rogue One. That's a good one. Which myself, as recently rewatched and thoroughly enjoyed once more. In Star Wars lore, the Tantive IV was designed by the Corellian Engineering Corporation. This highly modified CR-90 Corvette was a standard ship used by Alderaan officials. In this case, our Tantive IV was used by Bail Organa during and after the Clone Wars, then ultimately being used by Leia Organa to take the plans to the Death Star and recruit Obi-Wan Kenobi to join the rebellion. The Tantive IV also made an appearance in Rise of Skywalker as part of the Rebel base, measuring over 5 inches, 14 centimeters high, 24 inches, 62 centimeters long, and 7 inches, 19 centimeters wide. This version of the Tantive IV is actually a pretty sizable playset. There was a UCS version released in 2001, which was a legend in its own right. Similar to most LEGO Star Wars sets, there's, always subsequent and updated versions released by LEGO. Kind of makes it more exciting as you build, as building techniques and pieces change and update, we get updated models for each new generation. Tantive IV was first called the Rebel Blockade Runner. Small, nimble, and a speedy ship at that. However, it had a few tricks up its sleeve as well. We didn't receive as much screen time of the Tantive IV during the original series, so I'm pretty glad that it made its cameo appearance at the end of Rogue One. Kind of a nice send-off for an iconic vessel. The Tantive IV's hull was mainly colored white with a couple of red accents, and then blaster burns, of course. Most of the CR-90 Corvettes were painted in this kind of color scheme. The interior walls of the ship were also painted in a fairly similar way. Since it was a vessel for the state diplomats of Alderaan, the ship featured dining rooms for hosting state dinners and conference centers for negotiations. The 11 engines of the Tantive IV made up the stern of the ship, and a central section was topped with 4 cannons. Next to it was a section of a ship with a passenger entrance lift, which lowered down into a landing platform. A cannon was fixed on top of this section as well, and it also carried 4 individual 8-passenger escape pods and then 8 individual smaller 4-passenger escape pods. So getting into more of the details here of the Tantive IV, we have the cockpit in the very front with some fuselage paneling right behind it, and of course, the classic Star Wars greebling design that we're going to see on the side. In the middle of the fuselage, we have rotating cannons. The main fuselage panel is right on the top below the cannons. And on the very side, we have the main fuselage greebling details that adorn this set. Moving on to the escape pod here, this detaches from the actual array, which we'll see in the maintenance video. And we have some greebling on the sides as well. So right behind the cockpit, there is some fuselage paneling, which connects the main fuselage to the cockpit. And we have some greebling too here, and some nice paneling. There's a lot of edges on this set. So we have two fins, the bottom stabilizer fin and the middle stabilizer fin. The middle one does hinge up and down. The stories that came from the production of the original Star Wars films are always so fascinating to me, especially given the leaps in innovation in visual effects, considering that's more of my day job anyway. Although I will say that the use of miniatures and motion control photography, not used so much anymore, but we can still learn and appreciate this production process. The ship's design actually comes from the initial design of the Millennium Falcon. You see, Space 1999 was a TV series that ran in 1975 to 1977, and it featured a ship called the Eagle Transporter, which was very similar to the initial Falcon design. The ILM model makers then redesigned the Falcon to its final look as we all know and love today. But the original Falcon design that was very similar to the Space 1999 Eagle Transporter, that would eventually become the Tantive IV. It was a giant model that required a high level of intricacy. It was about 194 centimeters in length. Fun fact, there was actually a small centerfold in the cockpit interior, which obviously wasn't visible on camera. They also needed to make a smaller version of the Tantive IV because they needed to accommodate the limited length of the Dysterflex camera track, which was the motion control photography that was used in the films. Jumping back to the actual details of the Tantive IV, we'll spin around to take a look at the rear of the ship. The main engine bodies, there are around 11, exactly 11 of them, with some thruster details and exhaust portals to match. So on the very top row, we have 4 engines, and we have little greebling details on the very top of each engine. There's also a paneling on the top of one engine, which I assume is kind of a repair paneling. There's a heat exhaust top on the top of the rear engines, or on the top row of the engines. You have some greebling here too, and then you see that large connector on the bottom left-hand screen, which connects all 8 engines together. On the sides, we have a little bit more greebling too, and we have some nice paneling. It's a little bit more subtle here. And you can see the middle row has 3 engines, the middle row has 3 engines, and then the bottom row has 4 engines. So it's a 4-3-4 setup entirely. You know, I hesitate to utilize many examples from the Rise of Skywalker film because, of course, everybody has their own strong opinions on that film. But for myself, I don't really see it as kindly as the other canon films. However, in order to finish our story of the Tantive IV, I think it's fair to dive into the story of how the Tantive IV was recovered and returned to General Organa. Many years after the end of the Galactic Civil War, a former Imperial senator discovered the remains of the Tantive IV. This senator was sympathetic to Leia's cause and returned it to her after repairing it, allowing Leia to be reunited with the ship that was her personal flagship before, and now it became it once more. So the starship made its film appearance in the Battle of Exegol, tragically being destroyed by Darth Sidious when he used his Force lightning to destroy one of its engines. So let's spin around to take a look at some of these smaller details on the Tantive IV. So we'll start off with the large rotating cannon on the very top side. We have the primary cannons, and we have the stud shooting cannons right below it, and then additional greebling too. The radar array is towards the rear of the ship behind the main fuselage, and there's a large cylindrical base that makes up the bottom of it. Taking a closer look, there's small blaster details, and then the rotating base on the bottom. I don't even know if to call it blasters or cannons, but we'll just go for blasters for now. The top fuselage has some great greebling details too, and a little bit of a unique design for the slanted panelings, just smaller pieces here. On the very top, at the very front, we have cockpit windows and some opening paneling details here. These are all stickered pieces, but we still get a nice amount of matching between the stickers and the pieces themselves. The top of the cockpit also has some greebling elements, mainly of a sticker piece. And let's reset the Tantive IV to be looking straight forward. So the Tantive IV lives on through updated LEGO models, new media, Hasbro collectors, fleet lines, which look pretty awesome, and die-cast models. So the miniature model of the Tantive IV used in the shooting of the actual original trilogy was sold at auction for $450,000. I believe it was one of the most expensive Star Wars items ever sold at auction. So from our very first impression of the Tantive IV in The New Hope to the LEGO models that we admire today, it's been a pleasure to dive into the lore, history, and background of this legendary Star Wars ship. So as we brought the Tantive IV into our, let's say, maintenance, conservation, stories, our all-around purpose area that we use at the museum before taking a closer look at the sets that we are working on. Actually, it wouldn't be the conservation, because conservation is actually a different room where we kind of relight it to be all sorts of different lighting schemes and environments. For here, we're in our museum, we're taking our Dyson with the soft brush head attachment and going to town over all of the exposed areas of this particular Star Wars set. This is one of the smaller sets that we're going to be working on in our time at the museum, just because we do have a fair amount of Star Wars sets that we still have, but they haven't been built yet. So we do have quite a bit of sets in our backlog. Our second test tool that we use in our, let's say, dusting challenge and work and task, I suppose, is the high-powered electric blower. So this just kind of blows any of the dust off that we didn't get with the Dyson soft brush head. But in reality, the soft brush head is going to do the most out of any of the tools that we have. But for getting into those small corners, the high-powered blower actually helps quite a bit. So taking off each of these little sections of the Tantive IV will allow us to, start to dust within the interiors. Now we'll say a couple times that in the interiors don't really have a huge accumulation of dust, so we don't have to be all that careful about it, but we still try our best to make sure that every portion of the set is taken care of. So moving on to the portion of the maintenance film where we're going to be kind of checking all of the pieces, making sure nothing's fallen off and everything's kind of, pushed together as well as they possibly can. We'll start off with the very front of the Tantive IV. So the cockpit section here, large paneling details that we just have to push together to make sure that they're on. The middle of the frame, the cockpit panels are put together at a middle frame juncture here, which we're just going to push all of these slanted pieces to make sure that they all fit correctly. The center hull and mid-fuselage portion of the ship here has a couple pieces that can be taken off, meaning like the top roofs and top panelings of the roofs. So we're just gonna push all the little greebling details just to make sure that it's on pretty tight. The top panel is going to move, as we told you before, because it is intended to pop off. But there's some small greebling details like this one, so just making sure that it's rotated in the correct way, as some of the greebling details kind of can become a little bit askew. Pushing on the fuselage with fins to make sure that they're all on tight. This bit actually does come off as well, as we'll show you later. And then the teeny escape pods, which also has some detailing, greebling detailing here. The main engine array is pretty sturdy. We just want to make sure that there's no loose pieces here. With these kind of greebling details on Star Wars ships, it's a little bit more difficult to check whether a piece is missing. And then let's turn the Tantive IV around so that we can look at the rear. So there's 11 rocket engines, just pushing all of the, let's say, flame pieces. Just make sure that they're all on sturdy. Top row of the engines here, it's on, I don't really remember exactly how it's all connected together, but it's pretty sturdy, even though the actual cylindrical portion of the engine does move around a fair bit. But for the most part, it is pretty sturdy on there. Turning it around one more time. Now we'll start to get into some of the other details of the ship, mainly all like the moving details, just to make sure that they all work. So the blasters hinge backwards like so, and hinge forwards pretty well. There's some stud shooters there too, and the entire structure rotates. It's not a very smooth rotation, it's kind of like it like clicks a little bit, but that's totally fine because it's pretty sturdy. Now these port blasters rotate very, very easily. Port, I just mean like port side of the ship. It rotates pretty easily. Starboard side, exact same thing. Rotates like a charm. And that little blaster portion is a little bit of a delicate piece, so we have to be a little bit careful there. Now these fuselage fins, I don't imagine they're designed to be, or you're not supposed to actually move them or hinge them, but they are on hinge pieces, so we always just double check, make sure that they're moving without any struggle. The pop-up handle on the top allows you to actually carry the Tantive IV and swoosh it. The bottom mounted rotating blasters are a little bit more easy to rotate than the top ones, but it's a little bit harder to access, we will say that. Rotating the Tantive IV around so that we can look at the starboard escape pod. It has a removable top panel, which allows you to put a small minifigure in there. And we can put the escape pod back onto its holding position. The port escape pod is just a mirror image of that. I believe we do have a C-3PO inside of here. Yep, there we go. Same removable top panel. So put that back on and then put the escape pod back onto the Tantive IV. Rotating once more so we can take a look at the last removable portion of the Tantive IV. It's the rear fuselage area where we have extra rockets stowed away. There are, the rockets are right underneath the cockpit area, which we don't really like keeping because it looks a little bit I don't really like those kind of shooters. So we don't typically display them on our shelves here. And the middle fuselage is where the main cabin is, where we have a nice cabin interior with some chairs and, just it's nice to be able to look inside and then just make sure that there's no loose pieces. I don't believe there's only that, let's say, binoculars pieces on the right-hand side, but that's about it. Putting the cabin roof paneling back on. And then I believe we're ending with the cockpit here, the removable cockpit top panels. There's some, let's say, like chair pieces here, or like places for the minifigures to sit. And they're very, very loose pieces. They're not on super steady, so just make sure that they're there. Make sure that they haven't fallen off. Let's go back and do our finishing touches on this set. So we'll reset here and bring the Tantive IV back into our normal setup so that we can do our finishing final touches. Now, this isn't expressly necessary for anyone who is working on dusting your sets. It's just something that we do here because we're not necessarily filming every portion of these films in chronological order on the same day. So because of that, just making sure that we get any of the dust off that we might have missed or has accumulated over the last, let's say, day or 2 days or so. Actually, dusting with a makeup brush is how we used to dust every single one of the Lego pieces that we had. Actually, I take that back. There aren't as many studs here as I initially thought. A lot of it's surprisingly smooth, but unfortunately, there are quite a few stickered pieces, which isn't ideal. Printed pieces tend to hold up better over time, while stickers can start to degrade, especially with any kind of water-based cleaning that we do here. So we'll just have to be extra careful and make sure to wipe everything down thoroughly afterwards. Moving on to the section right behind the cockpit. There's a small corridor that connects to the main hull of the ship. There's some nice detailing on the top here. Jumping back to the sides of the cockpit, here we go with the studded portions. There's a bit of detailing here, nothing too complex, but it works. From a distance, it gives off that classic greebling effect, similar to what we see on the Imperial Star Destroyer. So we'll just take a pass here. As we continue along the main hull of the ship, this side section features smooth detailing with curved pieces. There's not much in terms of playability here, but as we move further down, we'll get to the guns and missile features. Carefully wiping everything down, especially after using the water, just to make sure there's no water spots left behind. Moving on to the guns on top of the Tantive IV, I have some mixed feelings about these playable features. They fire those red studs, which isn't nearly as bad as the older designs with those oversized missile rods, but still. I personally prefer elements that stay true to how they looked in the movies rather than focusing on playability, but I like this set regardless. As we move even further along the main hull, I think this section is one of my favorite parts of the set. The level of detailing here is great, and the rotating turrets are really well done. I don't think I've seen these particular pieces used so often, especially not as weapon elements, so it's a nice touch.
The movement adds to the realism, and even though the details are small, they make a big difference. This area is pretty tricky to clean though. The electric duster and even the Dyson soft brush don't quite reach, so using the Q-tip is the best way to get into all those tight spaces. The other side is pretty much an exact carbon copy, so we'll repeat the process, getting the Q-tip into all the little studs. Fortunately, there aren't too many studded sections here. There's more greebling and fine detailing, along with a good amount of smooth pieces, which makes the cleaning process much easier. The Q-tip glides over them pretty well, so this part should go by pretty quickly. I think the sides of Star Wars ships are pretty well known for this kind of detailing. It's actually pretty similar to what you see on the UCS sets. Not exactly a dust magnet, but you never really know with dust. It has a way of settling into the most unexpected places. So we'll just take a quick pass with the Q-tip, though I imagine the duster already took care of most of it. Jumping a bit out of order here, but we're heading back to the top of the hull, which has a lot more of this kind of greebling detailing. You know what? I changed my mind. I think that this set is more similar to the UCS Y-Wing rather than the UCS Star Destroyer. Just with the level of intricate greebling here, it matches that set. And as always, using a microfiber cloth to make sure we don't leave any water spots behind. I'm not really sure what to call this rear portion here. I guess it's just another corridor-like section connecting the main hull to the rest of the ship. These two little pods on either side of the Tantive IV, I think they're escape pods, and they actually detach and can hold minifigures too. The little wings on the sides here are a nice detail as well. You wouldn't really hold the Tantive IV from there, which is probably for the best since they fall off pretty easily. If you watch the Star Destroyer video, you might notice an interesting contrast in this one. Instead of the ominous red lighting we used in that video, this time we're working with blue. Here's a top-down view of the same corridor section with the delicate wings. I actually forgot that the two on the sides can actually fold up. I don't think this is an intentional feature, it's just how they're mounted together, but it looks good either way. From this angle we can also see the other side of the escape pod, which wasn't really visible before. And as always, we're following up with the microfiber cloth to make sure everything's clean. Luckily these are all smooth pieces, so it's a pretty easy process. The Tantive IV's engines are easily the most iconic part of the set in my opinion. It's the detail that makes the ship all instantly recognizable. I love that there are so many engines in the back, and this model really emphasizes their design, highlighting all 10 with intricate detailing. Honestly, if I could just display the set with just the engines facing forward, I probably would, because while the front is nice, the engines are definitely the standout feature. Cleaning them is a little bit tricky though. With all the tight spaces, it's much easier to rely on the duster rather than trying to get into every crevice with the Q-tip. From the side view, you can see the flat pieces on the bottom engines, which are thankfully pretty easy to clean. A quick pass with the microfiber cloth or duster typically does the trick. But the interior engines, the ones tucked further inside, are much of a different story. These require a lot more effort and alternative cleaning methods to really get into all the small spaces. We'll start making our way back to the other side of the Tantive IV, focusing on the cleaning the same details. It's pretty much a mirror of the other side, so while, it can get a little bit repetitive, it's not too bad since the details are very similar. From this angle, we get a clearer view right behind the cockpit area. The smooth elements on the set really stand out, compared to the more angular designs of something like the Imperial Star Destroyer. Tantive IV has a much sleeker and streamlined look. This emphasis on smooth surfaces not only makes this model look great, but it also makes it a hell of a lot easier to clean, which I'm definitely happy about. We did take a closer look at the rear corridor and the escape pods earlier, but I think it's worth revisiting this side for a better look. Like I mentioned, it's pretty much the same as the other side, so there's not a ton of variation. But I do love the detail on the fins here. They remind me more of a plane, and I think they give this ship an iconic and unique look. I know it's not necessary for space travel, no air resistance and all that, but I still appreciate the design. It's a nice touch. We reached the rear of the Tantive IV now, and we're focusing on the bottommost engines. These are easy enough to clean, but if you look closely, you'll notice the 3 engines in the middle. They're really difficult to reach with the Q-tip without disassembling the top portion of the set. So for now, we just rely on the electric duster, which we took care of earlier. Now let's flip the Tantive IV over so we can get to the rear engines. This will give us better access to clean the thrusters and make sure everything is dust free. I don't think I mentioned this earlier, but at the very top here, there's a little handle that pops up, making it easier to carry this set. Repeating this from earlier, but this part of the set is definitely my favorite. Seeing all 10 of these engines arranged in such a unique 4-3-4 formation is just awesome. I haven't really seen any other ships or planes with this kind of design, so for me, when I first saw Star Wars, this was a part of the ship that really caught my attention. Just looked fantastic. Most of the other Tantive IV sets have similar thruster pieces, but this one really does that design justice.